Apocalypse is presumably the fiercest of X-Men villains ever, and the 12 is really the answer to just how good a villain Apocalypse could be. In the story, Apocalypse plans to siphon the powers of our group of 12 mutants, but they're determined to fight back. What makes the 12 worth your time are two things. One, it has a bittersweet ending, and two, the comic book sets the stage for the ultra-magnificent Age of Apocalypse saga, which is also something we have explored. So, without further ado, let's explore the entire X-Men vs. Apocalypse, the 12 saga. But before that, let me quickly take you through the background from Uncanny X-Men issue -1. Prelude. The Uncanny X-Men issue -1 begins with the fourth wall being shattered from the very first panel as Stan Lee himself, and then there's a little scene with Jean and her father, but that's not relevant to the story right now. Moving on, we are introduced to what the Sentinels are and how Master Mold exists in the future. Anyway, we then meet Bolivar Trask's son Lawrence, who was strapped to a chair. He was having visions of the future, visions of the X-Men. The location was the home of Dr. Bolivar Trask, an ordinarily brilliant man with an extraordinarily secret shame. Dr. Trask used an amulet of his own creation to halt his mutant son Lawrence's disturbed state. Lawrence's visions were prophetic, and he had once predicted the very hour of his mother's death. Bolivar was convinced that people like his children were the next step in humanity's evolution. He had worked tirelessly to protect them, but had failed both his wife and his daughter, Tanya Trask, who had become Madam Sanctity in the future. His son was all he had. So, Dr. Trask denied his son knowledge of his true genetic identity, hiding the truth of what happened to Lawrence during his blackouts. Bolivar, along with Lawrence, was the creator of Sentinels. The philosophy was simple. There would be a genetic civil war between ordinary human beings and mutant kind, and humans wouldn't stand a chance without the help of mutant-murdering Sentinels. Yes, Bolivar acknowledged the power people like his children possessed, yet he saw it not in awe, but in fear. As he was sharing his plan with his son, two women clashed. These were Rachel Summers, aka Mother Ascani, and Tanya Trask. You see, Tanya Trask was alive. She had come from a future where Apocalypse had won, where the fabled 12, who were destined to save humanity, failed. She had returned to stop her father from creating the Sentinels, which would be Apocalypse's henchmen terrorizing mutants and humans alike. Rachel Summers was in this timeline to stop Tanya, to stop her from meddling with the sacred tapestry of time. And though Tanya visited her father's lab, Rachel was successful. She did not allow her to meddle with the timeline and took her back to where she belonged, in the future. But Rachel didn't notice that Tanya hadn't entirely failed that day. On the computer screens at Trask's lab, a message had flashed. Inside the Master Mold Sentinel, a program titled The 12 was installed, after which all references to it were swiftly deleted. But that was enough. On that day, deep in the heart of a rapidly approaching darkness, Rachel Summers had managed to bury the seeds of hope. And now that we have the setup, let's explore X-Men vs. Apocalypse, the 12. Caliban's entry. In the San Francisco Bay, two men, along with their crew, were aboard the recently docked Queen Cleopatra ship, which had just returned from the ancient Middle East. While looking through the ship's cargo to find the fabled Sapphire of the Sphinx, they came across a gigantic mummy. Intrigued, the thieves came closer to the object, only to see it explode into pieces to reveal the gargantuan Pestilence. At one juncture in his life, Pestilence was named Caliban and was among the gentlest of creatures. Being a Morlock, one of the small number of mutants who scavenged a life together beneath the streets of Manhattan, he lived a relatively peaceful life. However, tragedy struck one day, and almost all of his fellow Morlocks were murdered. Filled with rage, Caliban struck a deal with Apocalypse, no less than the devil himself. Now, under his master's orders, those he once cared for the most were going to suffer at his hands. Who tops the list of targets, you ask? Well, a certain enigma named Cable. Cable's entry. Cable, the muscular mutant with the powers of telepathy and telekinesis, is a man on a mission. He's in the warehouse of the X-Force, our team of mutant outlaws for whom he is family. Cable, who had been a mentor, a father figure and a leader to the team, had been separated from them for months. Now, he's back from the future. After getting a rather hostile reception from Domino, he explains his return. He explains that he is going to fight a final, absolute battle with a certain chance of his death. He's back to say his goodbyes. In Cable's safe house in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan, Ozymandias floats like an apparition. The ghost-like figure was once one of Apocalypse's men, recording every triumph and every sin that his master committed. Now, he has been freed, and much like Caliban, he wants revenge. In the room with him is Cable's mentor, Blacksmith. Ozymandias asks Blacksmith if Cable is ready. The master responds in the affirmative. Hence, an unlikely alliance is forged to take on Apocalypse. Cable visits his team, the X-Force, and feels truly at home once again. After embracing Tabitha, aka Meltdown, and Sam, aka Cannonball, and meeting the new joinee Jesse Bedlam, he inquires about the whereabouts of Teresa, an old member of the X-Force. The group explains that Teresa had left the Force a few weeks ago due to a severe injury. While the team was fighting against a group of villains called the New Hellions, Feral, a former X-Force member, slashed Teresa's throat open. Though she was saved, she lost her voice, and thus her powers. Needless to say, her sonic-based powers depended on her ability to use her vocal cords. Finding herself powerless, depressed, and confused, Teresa Cassidy, aka Sirin, quit the team. Although Cable was remorseful upon hearing this, Danny explained that it wasn't his fault, and that while the team is aware of the dangers out there, it fights and learns from its mistakes. Cable, a proud teacher in that moment, acknowledged this display of maturity. He then handed them a CD containing the locations of every safe house he has across the globe, as well as other crucial survival information. He explained to the young mutants that he might die in the immediate future. Meanwhile, Caliban, aka Pestilence, was rummaging through garbage for food and something to camouflage himself amidst the city dwellers when a tween-looking boy met him. The boy told him that he won't find any food worth eating in the dumpster. Caliban, surprised by the fact that the kid wasn't afraid of him, agreed to follow him to his dad's restaurant down the street. However, when the kid handed the mutant some bread and pasta to eat, his father arrived with a shotgun, carrying every ounce of hatred for Caliban, which seemed to be missing from the child. Despite the boy's pleas for the safety of his new mutant friend, his dad ignored him and positioned his gun. Attempting to save Caliban, the kid got hit by a moving truck, falling to the ground unconscious. The enraged fathers blamed Caliban for what happened. A crowd gathered, confusing and disorienting our mutant. Though the old Caliban would have fled the scene, Pestilence decided to react with rageful violence. In the X-Force warehouse, Cable is determined to take on Apocalypse alone, but the team denies this, insisting on joining him. While they're talking, they hear commotion coming from the window, and Caliban comes crashing through the glass and concrete, aggressive as can be. Referring to himself as Pestilence, the first Horseman of Apocalypse, the Beast makes one thing clear: there is going to be a battle, and it's going to be fierce. Wolverine. The X-Men were aboard a spaceship. As Wolverine discussed a plan to stop Magneto with the rest of the team, another spaceship crashed into theirs, rendering the group unconscious. Several Skrulls, which are creatures belonging to a race of shape-shifting aliens, entered the spaceship. The crash wasn't accidental, but was rather a well-planned-out mission, as the Skrulls deployed one of their own to replace Wolverine. The Skrull Wolverine was trained and conditioned for months for the role he was about to take. After saying their goodbyes, the rest of the Skrulls left the X-Men in cryostasis, a state similar to being unconscious. Upon awakening around 8 days later, the mutants were oblivious to the fact that there was a Skrull among them. Only Professor Xavier seemed to remember something by way of telepathic nightmares. For this new, or shall we say, fake, Wolverine, what he was supposed to do was clear underplay the Professor. Slowly but surely, the Skrull convinced the team that their father figure had had a breakdown and that there was little they could do about it. At the same time, he convinced everyone that he was in fact Wolverine, trying to do everything he could to match the space once occupied by his host persona. The plan worked, with Xavier's credibility being questioned and the X-Men being disbanded. But the victory didn't last long. Soon enough, the team caught on. The Skrull Wolverine's identity was revealed, and the real Wolverine was found. Except, something had changed. Wolverine was no longer a good old X-Man. In the X-Men headquarters in New York, certain observed patterns had become apparent. The group expresses immense concern for their old partner Wolverine, while contemplating the circumstances of him was replaced by the Skrulls. A larger issue looms on the heads of the mutants. What on earth happened to their buddy, the true Wolverine, for him to turn into that? That was Death, one of the 4 Horsemen of Apocalypse. Death has eyes devoid of life and mercy. He was being trained to destroy the Incredible Hulk when he had a flashback to his recent past. Being carried in a half-conscious, half unconscious state by a couple of Skrulls, he was Wolverine. He was thrown into a room where a towering man wearing a fez spoke with him. The man informed Wolverine that he was about to face his greatest challenge yet. In the present, Death, aka Wolverine, refers to the same man as his master, mounted on a fiendish-looking horse, alluding to his status as one of Apocalypse's Horsemen. He's hunting down Hulk, an endeavor in which he succeeds. Upon attacking the Green Giant, Death steadies himself to join a truly deathly fight. Let's just say Hulk, especially at this time of his life has anger issues. We return to the flashback. Wolverine was sitting in a room filled to the brim with green smoke. Trying to gather his thoughts, he was preparing himself for what was coming. Two Skrulls took him to a circular room wherein the man with the fez stood. He revealed himself to be ensue Apocalypse himself. As Apocalypse warned Wolverine that his destiny awaited him, our burly mutant was unbothered, claiming that Apocalypse was only making empty claims. His nonchalant attitude suddenly turns into fear when, seemingly out of nowhere, one of his deadliest foes, Sabretooth, appeared to attack him. Lying injured on the ground, Wolverine wondered what the hell Sabretooth was doing there. In the present, Death attempts to stab Hulk, claiming that it is his master, Ensabanua's order. Hulk, now enraged beyond his wits, grabs Death's sword and bends his spine using it. As Death screams in pain, we return to the flashback wherein Wolverine and Sabretooth were fighting a fierce battle too. Sabretooth, appearing much bigger than his opponent, was laced with much more adamantium than Wolverine. He revealed that their battle was to prove who was worthy of the mantle of one of Apocalypse's Horsemen. Death. Something snapped inside Wolverine upon hearing this, and he stabbed his opponent with his signature sharp claws. Refusing to allow a bloodthirsty monster like Sabretooth to gain such omnipotence, Wolverine mercilessly slashed at Sabretooth, leaving him in a pile of his own blood. Convinced that he'll be able to fight the programming by Ensabanur and break free to pursue the greater good, the burly mutant smiled and asked if his performance was enjoyed. In the present, Hulk, drowning in raw and raging fury, is brutally fighting Death when he notices that Death is, in fact, Wolverine. Referring to him as Little Man, Hulk remembers all the times the two fought and becomes even more enraged. In the past yet again, we witness an operation theatre wherein all the adamantium from Sabretooth's body was being transferred to that of Wolverine, much to his irritation. As the painful transfer was about to begin, there was horror in both men's eyes which Logan attempted to mask. In the present, Death retaliates with a blow to Hulk, and the latter throws an entire tree on the former. Death attempts to stab Hulk, but the rage of the monster is so strong that the mutant is left lying on the floor like dirt. After being satisfied with his victory, the Hulk flees and enters Apocalypse himself in his true form. Disappointed in his Horseman's defeat, the supervillain makes one thing clear: not only the Hulk, but the entire world will perish as they take the path to a new era. Back to Caliban. We return to the X-Force headquarters, where Caliban now stands in his true, evolved form as Pestilence, the first Horseman of Apocalypse. Our team of mutants is now faced with a moral dilemma. How on earth are they supposed to deal with this devilish form of their former friend? As for Pestilence, he wants revenge. The former X-Force member is enraged at his former team, accusing them of abandoning him. All attempts to put a friendly hand forward seem to go in vain, as Pestilence declines them and throws James Proudstar to the ground. Danny Moonstar, confident in her recently intensified mutant abilities, tries to stop Pestilence by directing an energy blast to his shoulder. However, he seems least affected by this, proceeding to tear down a wall and leave the building. With her abilities of telepathy and illusions, and James Proudstar with his superhuman strength, speed, and stamina are both integral members of the X-Force. Still, these superpowers are no match for a desire for revenge mixed with the gifts of Apocalypse. As the team contemplates following him, their leader, Cable, denies this. He claims that Pestilence is only after him and that they have a team member in need of immediate medical attention. As Cable tends to a wounded James Proudstar, he declares that he is now a changed leader who will never leave his teammates to suffer. Caliban enters a mysterious location location with pillars inscribed with ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. He does not know what the place is or why he has come here. It is as unfamiliar to him as the strange voice in his head urging him onward. Yet he answers the call instinctively, without hesitation. He is unable to resist the enchanted beacon flooding his subconscious mind, leading him forward, keeping him on the move. As he stands in the room facing a statue, he hears a voice, almost majestic. Is he not? A lady seems to be speaking. Indeed, the voice belongs to a woman, a cloaked figure with nails painted red, her hood hiding her face, denying us knowledge of her identity. The woman explains that since Pestilence has found Cable, the first phase of their mission was complete. Now, she claims, Cable will come to them on his own accord. She explains that they seek to strike at the X-Men by targeting Cable, who is essentially one of their own and one of the strongest mutants alive. Only after this would she be released to her own designs, far across the galaxy. But who is this intergalactic mutant murderer? Why, Deathbird herself, the bringer of war, as she likes to be called. Elsewhere, laser beams zap through the jungle, scorching the trees and the animals alike. Who is emitting them? Well, this was Cyclops himself, first among the X-Men. He had come here to battle his inner demons. Tonight, he believes that he has won, but appearances can be deceiving, as we shall find out soon. The jungle wasn't a jungle at all. It was just a simulation, a false sequence which was swiftly terminated by the computers in the building. In walks Jean Grey, better known as Phoenix. Like her husband, she was among Professor Charles Xavier's original class of X-Men. Cyclops is Cable's father, and quite evidently, the family dynamic is a little messed up. Cyclops and Cable could never be the ideal father and son. Almost losing his child when he was just an infant, Cyclops regrets his actions deeply. Now, thanks to Cable's time traveling, the son is older than the father and has more life experience. Cable had said his goodbyes to the X-Men, and his old man was worried. However, Phoenix comforts Cyclops, telling him that they won't let anything happen to Cable. Back in the X-Force headquarters, the team is splitting up to find Caliban. Cable uses his abilities of telepathy to find out that an unseen wall has been erected specifically to keep a telepath out. It appears that the team is expected. The leader urges the members to proceed with extreme caution. Jesse Bedlam doesn't seem convinced by Cable though. Jesse points to the fact that Cable was the one who let Feral into the X-Force, the same Feral who left the Force and ripped out Teresa's vocal cords. Teresa was once a member of the Force, and the fact that Cable indirectly put her in danger made Jesse deeply suspicious of him. Still, Cable is certain in his approach to dealing with Caliban. What happened to their friend wasn't his fault, and Cable wasn't going to hurt him further. Instead, the person who made Caliban Pestilence was going to pay, and he was going to pay dearly. The team makes it to Deathbird's lair. Caliban grabs Sunspot, an X-Force member whose mutant abilities are powered by the sun, and slams him to the floor. The X-Force forms a circle around them and cuts off all escape routes. Still seeking to save your former friend from his true destiny, human? Deathbird inquires in a tone laced with sarcasm. It might be commendable if it wasn't so pathetic. Deathbird, however, is not Deathbird anymore. While that was the name she favored earlier, she now reveals that she goes by a different name. War, another horseman of apocalypse elsewhere, in a little diner in Hell's Kitchen several years in the future, an elder sister and her younger brother share a conversation. Cable came from this timeline, and the girl, Stacy Kramer, was his lover before he left. The kid asks his big sister if she's thinking of Cable, who they refer to as Nate. Stacy misses Nathan. Tears fill her eyes as she describes what love is to her little brother, who patiently listens while eating a cheeseburger. Love is a feeling when you care about someone more than you care about yourself, she says. From the window, a woman in a trench coat with straight brown hair observes. The lady is Irene Merriweather, a journalist who worked with Cable. She wonders about him too, thinking about all the lives he's touched and how he changed her as a journalist. You better come back, Cable, she thinks silently. You wouldn't let me die. I'm not about to let you. At that moment, in the present, Cable and the X-Force are very much flirting with death as they face Deathbird turned War and Caliban turned Pestilence, two horsemen of apocalypse, in one place. War declares that the gift of Pestilence A plague has been unleashed. The statues of Egyptian figures that were all over the place now turn alive. Upon attacking them, they simply turn into sand, making them difficult to defeat. The X-Force steadies itself for attack. As Pestilence brutally fights, Cable tries to stop him. He doesn't harm his old friend, but tries to form a telepathic link with Caliban's mind. Meanwhile, War plays her own mind games by releasing a virus which attacks from within, not physically, but mentally. The virus causes the teams to hold their aching heads and fall to the floor helplessly. Cable tries to fight stone with stone. If he can't attack with his body, he'll attack with his mind. Using his telepathic abilities, he enters the psionic plane. His consciousness leaves his physical form, moving towards this place, which is only accessible to telepaths. The psionic plane is a realm of pure thought, where imagination and the uninhibited capacity of the mind rule. Cable seeks to fight the plague of Pestilence, the virus in question, in this astral state of consciousness. In doing so, he hopes to undo some of the damage done to Caliban's psyche by Apocalypse. Caliban's mind has reshaped the psionic plague into a semblance of his former home in the Morlock tunnels, where so many of his loved ones died. The bricks of the tunnels resemble faces screaming for Cable to help them. Among these faces is James Proudstar, and he appears to be imprisoned. "It's a trap!" he shouts, advising Cable to leave. However, Cable ignores this and frees his teammate, claiming that the X-Force never abandons their own. As he does so, another figure arises from the surroundings, and it turns to resemble the face of Pestilence. "Is that so, Chosen One? Then why was Caliban forgotten and left behind?" the figure asks with rage in its voice. Cable tries his best to explain that they never meant to hurt Caliban, and that he was their friend. He urges Caliban to fight Pestilence, to fight what Apocalypse has done to him, but Caliban isn't convinced. He calls Cable a liar. He says that Apocalypse was the only one who had ever helped Caliban and made him strong. James urges Cable to fight Pestilence, claiming that millions will die if they lose the battle, but Cable still wants to deal with this in his way. Despite the X-Force's opposition, he sends them back to their bodies, away from the psionic plane. Now, in the mental world, it's just Cable against Pestilence. Meanwhile, in the physical world, the battle rages on, as the X-Force finds itself pushed to the limit of its abilities. They are losing precious ground, as the seemingly never-ending wave of Egyptian zealots continue their ferocious assault one step at a time. While fighting, the team notices the absence of Pestilence and War, but more importantly, the absence of Cable. Evidently, the Horseman tricked Cable. They made him leave his physical body vulnerable only for them to take it away. Now, the effects of the virus had disappeared and the X-Force was saved, but Cable wasn't. In Egypt, in a secret lair, Cable is tied up, unable to escape. He knows it was all a ruse by War and Pestilence to bring him to their master. As he stands there, a figure enters and touches his chin, referring to him as its greatest enemy. Cable is the first to fall in the battlefield of the Armageddon. According to the figure, 11 more shall follow. The figure, Apocalypse, Cyclops, and onward. Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, had devoted his life to the X-Men many years ago. They are his friends, his family, his very reason for living. Their goals were his goals, their problems were his problems. He has never doubted his place, until now. Cyclops stands in the Danger Room, a simulation of danger in the X-Men headquarters. He has been training and he's exhausted. It's 2:30 in the morning. Jean Grey, the Phoenix, and also his wife, walks in. Cyclops is worried. The recent incidents with the Skrulls replacing Wolverine, with Cable saying goodbye, they've got to his head. Jean comforts him and they call it a night. Meanwhile, surrounded by the sands of Egypt, a single pyramid stands with hidden depths within it. There exists, in this pyramid, a cult. A man wearing ancient Egyptian attire is speaking to the crowds about redemption. "For too many years, our former Lord and Master championed our faith alone against ignorance and opposition of godless barbarians," he yells. The Lord in question was cast into the nether regions of space and was lost for long years. However, he was recently found by the Skrulls and brought back to the people. The Lord in question was Ahmet Abdol, the living monolith. The essence of his was such that though his body would wither, his spirit would not die. Now, amongst his worshippers, his pharaoh is illuminated by a bright, blinding light. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters in Salem, New York, is now known as the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning. Little else has changed over the years, on the outside at least. Inside it are the X-Men of today: Angel, Nightcrawler, Beast, Jubilee, Marrow, Phoenix, Cyclops, Psylocke, Polaris, Storm, Rogue, Colossus, Shadowcat, Gambit, all stand in the briefing room. They're waiting for their founder and friend, Charles Xavier, to have a word with them. Charles possesses one of the most powerful telepathic minds on the planet. His dream of peace seems to become less likely every day, considering recent events. The team has been gathered for a purpose. The final analysis of a diary belonging to the late Irene Adler, aka Destiny, was complete. Destiny was once an X-Man with prophetic abilities, which she used to note in her diaries. She's no longer with the team, having died a while ago. Still, she helps them through her prophecies, even while she's in the grave herself. In the diary, the professor has found compelling evidence of knowledge about recent circumstances plaguing the team. Some entries, for instance, talk about Wolverine, about his Skrull imposter, and the fate he, the Skrull, suffered at the hands of the True Lone. On the screen, it reads, "Death kills the one who is become death." It's obvious that the Skrull has been murdered. Other incidents too have been detailed in the journal long before they actually came to pass. Suddenly, Professor Xavier gets a telepathic signal of an unfamiliar mind in the lower act duct of the back wall. He advises the X-Men to prepare for immediate action, and they swiftly take their place. Like clockwork, the walls crashes down and a gigantic Skrull appears. This species of Skrull is capable not only of changing shape, but size as well. They aren't as strong as they seem though, as their mass remains relatively constant. The Skrull clears an exit and rushes for it, but the team is able to stop him. As Colossus heads to attack him, Shadowcat interrupts, claiming that the Skrull has come as a friend and was trying to surrender, but just can't speak English. Colossus puts him down, but isn't entirely convinced. However, Shadowcat is able to speak the Skrull language fluently, and this calms Colossus down. Shadowcat, acting like a translator, tells everyone that the Skrull's name is Fizz. He's young and frightened, not fully in control of his mutant size-shifting powers. He was simply a messenger and had come with a message for Xavier. The team takes the Skrull away, while Colossus goes to the infirmary wing, inquiring about the health of his brother, Mikhail. Colossus is worried that the brief battle with the Skrull damaged the life-supporting equipment to which his brother was attached, but this wasn't the case. According to the doctor, Mikhail was in good health and was out of his coma, though he still needed a lot of rest and cannot afford to be disturbed. Colossus, deeply concerned about his traumatized brother, assures the doctor that he won't be. Mikhail. The X-Men, along with the Skrull, are with Professor X again. The Skrull Fizz was one of the mutant Skrulls held at the Skrull base when he escaped the destruction of it by shrinking down to microscopic size. He hitched a ride on Nightcrawler and thus bypassed all of the Institute's security systems. Apparently, he was a lower caste deviant, identifiable by the oval lobes protruding from his forehead. His kind are considered unclean and are traditionally slaughtered at birth. He had heard about Professor Xavier's crusade to defend mutants from persecution, and of his attempt to save his homeworld from Galactus, the giant planet-eater. Xavier was his hero, and he was here to join the X-Men. Storm uses the Shi'ar translator device to allow Fizz to speak for himself. Fizz goes on to explain that after the Skrull homeworld was destroyed, the Skrulls had many enemies and few allies. Therefore, when they were searching for more allies to survive, one entity offered many. No one knew who he was, but there were rumors that he was a death god. This ally was planning an infiltration and had plans for Terra mutants, in other words, mutants from Earth. The entity was Apocalypse. Moreover, since pure Skrulls cannot copy mutant powers without easily identifiable mechanics, deviant, so-called lower caste mutants have gained military value. They're allowed to live. There is banter of 12 special mutants, or who Fizz refers to as those who must not be harmed. Exactly who these 12 are, or why they mustn't be harmed, isn't clear yet, but we shall find out soon. Polaris, in a hopeless attempt, asks about her lost lover, Havoc. She asks Fizz what the Skrulls were doing with his costume. Havoc had allegedly been kidnapped by the Skrulls, and Polaris, who was worried sick, had seen them with her lover's costume. Fizz, though, is clueless, and Polaris storms out of the room, apparently heading to find Havoc for herself. Cyclops rushes to comfort her, but mainly to stop her. Polaris is convinced that Havoc isn't dead. If he was, she would feel it, but she doesn't. The costume she saw with the Skrulls was synchronized Havoc's energies, as though it was a part of him. Polaris declares that the Skrulls, or whoever they're in league with, must know something they don't know yet. The living monolith stands among his worshippers. Drunk with power, he tells them to kneel before him. Amongst the crowd of kneeling heads, though, one stands tall. The man is Ensue Nur Apocalypse. He had found the living monolith many years ago, when he was simply Ahmet Abdol, a non-mutant variant, a broken, beaten man. But Apocalypse gave him both power and form. He acquired a sample of Alex Summers' DNA and grafted it onto Ahmet. The experiment was only partially successful, resulting in an unusual symbiotic relationship. Power was split between Alex and Ahmet, instead of being shared. Now, however, with Alex gone, Ahmet maintains access to the joint energies through the former's headdress. Ahmet, however powerful, is still Apocalypse's pawn. You must be wondering, of course, who Alex Summers is. Well, presumably much to Polaris's displeasure, it's Havoc, the brother of Cyclops. We return to Xavier's Institute. Polaris, aka Lorna, has agreed to spend the night, but is restless, and the team is worried that she may leave at any moment. The diary Destiny possessed, with its prophecies, was too cryptic as it is. Coupled with Fizz the Skrull's information, more questions are raised than answers. However, there is one solid, salient fact among the pages: the list of 12 who can't be harmed. The 12 who could, if used as pawns, help Apocalypse achieve godhood. The 12 who could save the world or destroy it. Charles Xavier announces the names: Xavier, Cyclops, Phoenix, Storm, Iceman, Sunfire, Polaris, Cable, Bishop, Mikhail Rasputin, Colossus's brother, and the Monolith. Xavier is cut off. The living monolith? How could he be on the list? According to what the X-Men knew, he was gone for a while now, wasn't he? The team is confused, with Phoenix even suggesting that maybe it was a completely new monolith, unconnected to Ahmet Abdol. It's evident that we know a lot that the team doesn't, but this is put aside as the X-Men scramble to look for those of the 12 who they can find. Cyclops and Phoenix have their doubts about the list, though. Cyclops finds it suspicious that it's forcing him and Jean to stay in, to remain protected. He suggests that the 12 can't be the only ones who are able to save the world, that there are other X-Men, the X-Force, Generation X, all of whose help the Professor could use. But Xavier is certain. He wants Scott to stay in place, to hold things together. Then comes the big reveal. Professor Xavier had listed only 11 of the titled 12 before being interrupted. The last name was to be personally contacted by Xavier himself. It was the last man on Earth he hoped to approach. It was Magneto. Back to Cable. The X-Force is distraught over losing Cable. However, they rationally deduce that if Deathbird and Caliban were in Apocalypse's service, there would be only one place where they would have taken Cable: Egypt. The team readies itself to travel, but wonders, would it be far too late by the time they get there? Meanwhile, in Egypt, Cable is imprisoned. Facing him is Apocalypse. It's only a matter of time before I break free of this pathetic prison, snap your worthless neck, ending your long and perverse existence, and spit on your corpse, says Cable. He has lost everything, and he's furious. Apocalypse and Cable, mortal enemies in that moment, were preordained to be adversaries. Nearly a century and a half before Cable was born, Apocalypse had risen anew in the year 1859. During that era, Apocalypse had encountered a scientist who first gave him insight into who he was. The scientist's name was Essex, better known as Mr. Sinister. Apocalypse granted him longevity, power, and the freedom to indulge in his obsession with mapping the evolution of Homo superior, the mutant kind. He asked the scientist only for his obedience. As it turns out, it was a mistake. Sinister rebelled against Apocalypse almost immediately. He escaped his master's servitude. Apocalypse was compelled to return to his hibernation chamber to revitalize his energies so he would awake at the peak of his power and execute execute his plans of complete godhood and domination. But there was a problem. Apocalypse was torn from his slumber by an energy anomaly the likes of which no man had ever seen. His machinery ascertained that it wasn't a comet passing too close to Earth or the collapse of a nearby star, but possessed a biosignature. It had life, and the biosignature was none other than that of Cable's. When Cable was born, Apocalypse took immediate notice that the parents were both mutants. The child was, much like Apocalypse, the first of his kind. Apocalypse had decided in that moment that the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor must either be made to serve him or die. He injected the baby Cable with a virus which has ravaged his body since infancy. The experiment was simple. If the infant died, a future enemy would have been destroyed. If it survived, it would be Apocalypse's greatest pawn. As it turns out, the child was gone, and yet the man calling himself Cable was not. The answer was time travel. Somehow, the child was carried forward in the future and grew up. Now, the adult Cable was back in the era of Apocalypse to prevent the realization of his schemes. "Your presence here indicates that I will prevail in my eternal quest," says Apocalypse. The star-crossed mutants are inches from each other's faces. Disgust and contempt fill their eyes. Cable warns Apocalypse that even if he fails, there will be others. Apocalypse will be opposed at every turn, at every moment. Apocalypse knew exactly who he was referring to, the X-Men, but the villain wasn't unprepared. He explains that the X-Men are essential to his design. Soon, Cyclops and his fellow group of mutants would join Cable in the service of Apocalypse, he claims. Apocalypse is willing to destroy all Cable cares for. At the end, he says, he shall destroy Cable's lover, the waitress, Stacy Kramer. This strikes Cable in the heart. "Stay away from her, Apocalypse. She's not a part of this," he pleads. But Apocalypse is devoid of mercy and drunk on power. The girl in question is a feeble, inferior human in Apocalypse's eyes. He believes in the law of the jungle. In Apocalypse's world, the fittest survive, and the weaklings are irrelevant. He fails to understand love. He fails to understand why Cable cares so much for an alleged weakling. Cable wants to distract the monster and take him head on. He challenges him. "Wouldn't a true warrior finish off his opponent rather than taunt a helpless prisoner? You need me alive for some reason, Apocalypse, and that's going to be your downfall." But Apocalypse is unbothered. He tells Cable to think what he will, but in the meantime to prepare himself for a test. What could he mean? As Apocalypse leaves the room, Cable uses his telekinetic powers to bring his weapon, his scimitar, towards him. Without physical contact, he summons the weapon, attempting to use it to break free. Meanwhile, a figure watches from on high, silent as a grave. He walks towards Cable. "The Master may taunt you by leaving your weapon in plain sight, but my hypersenses tell me there's more to this fig sticker than meets the eye." The speaker is Wolverine, as Death, Apocalypse's Horseman. Cable is taken aback. He begs for Wolverine to remember who he is, to tame the monster Apocalypse has made him, to be a man of honor and integrity, to be an X-Man. Yet all of this falls on deaf ears. For Death, being an X-Man is useless. They fight and sacrifice everything to protect humanity, only to receive scorn, hatred, and pain in return. Cable's pissed. He's tired of convincing people. He's tired of telling them to remember who they are. Now, it's just Cable and Wolverine, and he's ready to kill Death before allowing him to ruin Wolverine's life. Yet even mid-fight, he begs. He still pleads for Logan to remember who he is, to fight the monster within him. But Death isn't trying to fight anything. He is the monster, and Apocalypse has made him an enhanced version of what he always was, a killer. After debating morality, good versus evil, right versus wrong with Death, Cable realizes that he has no other choice. He delivers a final blow and, using his telekinetic abilities, pushes Wolverine down a ledge, presumably having him fall to his doom. Apocalypse emerges from the background. For him, this move by Cable was proof of his ideological victory. Wolverine was an enemy, and if he hadn't been eliminated, he would have killed Cable. Cable, rather hilariously, replies by saying that Apocalypse is nothing but a heavily armed cockroach. But Apocalypse finds little humor in this, claiming that the comment wasn't an insult. As a child, Apocalypse was little more than a lowly insect. He was abandoned in the desert and forced into slavery. Now, his oppressors have been dead for millennia. While Apocalypse recognizes the plight of the weak, he refuses to see value in them, believing that only the strongest must survive. The battle between Cable and Apocalypse is deadly. It's one that has been inevitable for more than 5,000 years. Bones fracture, blood spills, but Cable ignores the pain. For if he wins, mankind may escape a horrible future and may be given another opportunity to decide its fate. But if he fails, the world, as it is presently known, will die. Each blow echoes like a thunderclap. Time and energy ebbs. Cable realizes that the success of his all-consuming mission becomes less likely with each passing instant. His chance, his life, it's all slipping away. Tired, weakened, he delivers one final blow. It's not enough. Death stands with Caliban in the corner. Apocalypse gives Cable a choice. Either continue his aimless, hopeless battle and watch death kill Caliban, who has served his purpose, or yield. Allow Caliban to survive and surrender to be imprisoned. Cable surrenders. Soon after, with Cable imprisoned yet again, Apocalypse asks him why he took such a decision. Why did Cable sacrifice his opportunity to destroy his greatest enemy just to save one person? Cable replies by saying that every life has value. Who knows? Even if I don't take you out, maybe Caliban will. Would the words prove to be prophetic? Apocalypse doesn't think so. Even if Caliban achieves the impossible, says Apocalypse, Cable's mission would still be forfeit, for his battle is not with an individual, but with human nature itself. Apocalypse goes on to quote the Bible, specifically Genesis 4:8. When they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. Ever has this been the way, Apocalypse claims. Cable prays with all his heart that Apocalypse is wrong, but the future looks bleak. The Fantastic Four. New York City's West Side piers serve as harbour to all sorts of tourist attractions, from public parks to historical war museums. In the midst of this is the headquarters of the legendary Fantastic Four. A very special family of 4+ resides in a converted warehouse here. A foursome of intrepid explorers gifted with great power by a barrage of mysterious cosmic rays in space years ago, along with the elastic Mr. Fantastic Reed Richard, his wife, Susan Storm Richards, the force field-wielding Invisible Woman, and her brother, Johnny Storm, the fiery Human Torch, the impenetrable Rocky Hyde and stupendous physical strength of Benjamin J. Grimm, the Thing, complete the roster of this heroic quartet. Nate Gray, on the other hand, is a complete X-Factor, one of very few refugees from an Earth that no longer exists, that never should have existed, a warped and twisted Earth finally fallen in the fires of its own mutant human bigotry, an Earth where Apocalypse had won. He found himself alone on the shores of this strange new world, not all that long ago. Some see reason to fear this young mutant. They fear the forces he commands, but does not yet control, the near-infinite power of Nate's mind, and the roiling cauldron of psionic energies that his own body cannot contain forever. Most see him as an intruder, at best, a dangerous ticking bomb in their midst. All see a stranger, and the Fantastic Four have ways of dealing with strangers. The Thing constricts Nate Gray with his arms, but he's able to shake him off, causing him to stumble to the ground. Big mistake, claims the Human Torch. Now he doesn't have to worry about harming a teammate tackling Nate using his fire. As he increases the heat and strikes at Nate mid-air, the latter forms a force shield, protecting himself from harm. But at the same time, the Thing, using Mr. Fantastic as a trampoline, jumps towards Nate, causing him to fall. The Thing tries to catch him before he hits the ground, but somehow finds Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch, in his arms. It was a trick. Nate, in the corner, confirms as much as he stands unharmed. The Thing is fed up. You're going down for this, brain teaser, he says. But as he attempts to strike at Nate, he ends up hitting Mr. Fantastic. Nate smirks, then uses his powers of mind control to pit the Thing against his own team. Just when he thinks he's winning though, Susan, aka the Invisible Woman, grabs him using her force field. Nate broodingly accepts defeat and suspends his mind control. Nate had come to the Fantastic Four a few months back, asking for help to track the other exiles of his world. The exiles in question were the only other survivors of the Age of Apocalypse. "I can't let this Garden of Eden to become that hell," he says. Now, having calmed down, Nate walks with Mr. Fantastic in the headquarters of the Fantastic Four, where the latter has been testing the former's mutant abilities. As Fantastic presents a detailed, scientific and wordy analysis of Nate's abilities, Nate wonders if the scientist superhero could find a way to keep him alive for longer than a few more years, to prevent his body from being consumed by his own energies. Mr. Fantastic's concerns about the extent of Nate's powers fall on deaf ears. He simply leaves the room, saying, "I'm outta here." Moments later, Nate joins Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch and the Thing, in the headquarters locker room. As he removes his towel to take a shower, he shares some light-hearted banter with the boys. Johnny, much to Nate's surprise, mentions Spider-Man when he says, "Any pal of Spidey's is a pal of mine." Johnny and Peter Parker go way back, having known each other since they were kids. It was Spider-Man who told the Human Torch all about Nate, about his psi powers, his majorly charged mutant girlfriend Threnody. While the men converse in the shower rooms, the Thing gets dressed and leaves, but not without pulling a small prank. Claiming that revenge is a dish best served, he sets the water temperature to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, leaving our mutant buddies shivering in the cold. At the same exact moment, in some sort of lab elsewhere, a mysterious figure downloads data pertaining to Nate's DNA. Who is this? What are they going to do to Nate? We shall find out in due time. Meanwhile, Nate is scoffing down dessert at the dinner table with little Franklin and his mother, whom he refers to as Mrs. R. The lady is Susan Storm Richards, Invisible Woman. Nate marvels at the fact that Susan can be a superhero, fighting monsters and aliens on the daily, while still being an active and present mother to her child. For Susan, it really isn't that unfathomable. They're a family after all. They do it not despite, but because of each other. Half a world away, deep beneath the sun and sands of Egypt's outlands, the waiting is over. The watching is done. The mysterious figure we just saw has had its eureka moment, its analysis from earlier points to a certain conclusion. It needs Nate. It orders its servant to bring him. The monster who has been tasked with the job can only be seen as a faint silhouette. But wait, it resembles someone we know. Could it be Pestilence? We're back in New York City, at the residence of the Richards family, housing two of the Fantastic Four. Nate and little Franklin are sharing a jovial conversation. Nate allowed the kid to have extra dessert, and he's quite evidently thrilled. Excitedly, the two discuss Iron Man and the Avengers. Honestly, the kid seems to be on a bit of a sugar rush. As Franklin tells Nate stories of his parents' superhero adventures, Nate actually seems impressed. Much like our viewers, he seems to be a huge fan of all of the Avengers, envying the kid for getting to hang out with them. As the banter goes on, Susan and Reed Richards watch through the cameras, sitting in what appears to be a control room. The couple expresses love for their child and pity for Nate, who never had a family of the kind they do. The conversation between the boys comes to an abrupt end though, as Nate declares that he has to go somewhere. He then looks directly into the camera and tells Mr. and Mrs. Richards to join him on the rooftop. Hilariously, the couple realizes that Nate was aware that they had been watching him the entire time. 60 seconds later, Nate and the family are all on the rooftop, bidding him farewell. He affectionately hugs little Franklin, assuring the kid that he can call him anytime he'd like. Reed Richards, standing tall and proud, tells Nate that he's not alone anymore, and that they're always available for him too. Nate thanks the family and dashes off the building, leaving in style. Floating above the city skyscrapers, Nate himself wonders why he chose to leave so suddenly. He was beginning to feel comfortable and to have fun. So, what was up? Maybe he was reminiscing about all he had lost and never found again over the years. Or maybe it was a flash or telepathy warning him of some impending disaster. Or maybe he was sabotaging his own chances at a real relationship. Nate's thoughts are interrupted by the fierce face of a monster mutant, a Morlock. It's Pestilence. Nate has no clue about what's going on. Last he saw Pestilence, he was Caliban. He asks about where the X-Force is, to which Pestilence replies that he is free of them. Pestilence teleports a very confused Nate Grey in thin air to God knows where. Worlds are colliding. Malicious Magneto. Professor X and Magneto aren't terribly different. Both have been through unimaginable trauma. Both have seen the hideous face of oppression, and both have the same goal: the security and welfare of mutant kind. Magneto has won a homeland for mutant kind on the island that once prided itself as being their foremost oppressor. However, instead of rejoicing, he thinks he has dug mutants their own mass grave. Professor Xavier appears to Magneto as a hologram, warning him of something that is both urgent and dire. "We must talk," he solemnly declares. Magneto has his suspicions about the whole thing being a trap. Nonetheless, he calls his assistant, Fabian Cortez, and gives him a few orders to maintain the safety of the Citadel. He then requests a hypercharge, which is duly granted, allowing him to access his strength and transform to his true villainous form. Though Magneto and Charles Xavier are similar, there exist some areas where they are starkly different. For Xavier, mutants must protect humans and the Earth. Though they're seen as outcasts, mutants must use their powers for good, and humans and mutants must live together in peace. For Magneto, however, being a mutant means being superior to the human race. They are the past, while he represents the future. Magneto strikes Fabian to show him his place and then leaves his room on his way to the Xavier Institute of Higher Learning. The aforementioned island nation of Genosha lies in the Indian Ocean off the east coast of Africa, just north of Madagascar. Magneto and his associates live here, while Xavier's school is halfway around the globe, being just an hour's drive north of New York City. In the school, Cyclops and Storm are reviewing the latest threat the X-Men have to face. Once their teammate Wolverine is now Death, a Horseman of Apocalypse, and the X-Men are coming to terms with the implications of the change. 3 other Horsemen of Apocalypse must be contended with, specifically famine, pestilence, and war. The information of 12 important super mutants who are part of the prophecy of Apocalypse is also being dealt with. Cyclops has his issues with the fact that the information comes from Fizz, a Skrull, belonging to the same race of shape-shifting aliens who kidnapped Wolverine in the first place. Cyclops clearly has no love lost for Skrulls and does not trust Fizz one bit. Though he agrees with Storm on giving Fizz sanctuary, he quotes ex-President Ronald Reagan by saying, "Trust but verify." Cyclops is tired of playing a reactive game, countering every initiative which is always made by Apocalypse. He wishes to change that dynamic to break free of the vicious cycle, for the X-Men to stand a chance. He asks Nightcrawler for an update on the task of interpreting Destiny's diary. Destiny, once a member of the team, was a mutant who could see the future. Her diary contains descriptions of her knowledge, her visions. But there's one problem. The writing is extremely cryptic, barely understandable even to the author. Destiny spent her entire life trying to unravel the mysteries of her own diary. The X-Men were trying to finish that job in a matter of days. Needless to say, it wasn't going well. Colossus, one of the X-Men, asks Dr. McTaggart about the health of his brother Mikhail. The answer he gets is that Mikhail is recovering, getting stronger and getting better. Mikhail is one of the fabled 12, integral to the prophecy of Apocalypse. Colossus, deeply concerned for his brother's safety, asks the doctor if the medical scans provide any indication why Mikhail is one of the 12. The doctor, however, says that she hasn't got a clue. Jean Grey, better known as Phoenix, is using her telepathic abilities with the help of Cerebro, a powerful device used by Professor X to contact mutants. Nightcrawler tells Cyclops that they've finished uploading the latest data into the machines and that they're trying to get a lock on one of Apocalypse's Horsemen. However, Jean gets visions of Iceman instead. Robert Drake, aka Iceman, is one of the founding 5 members of the X-Men. His mutant codename aptly describes his mutant abilities. Right now, having crossed Long Island to the shores of Connecticut, he's using these abilities for all they're worth, in a desperate attempt to reach what he hopes is the safe haven of Xavier's school. After him is Deathbird, now as War, a Horseman of Apocalypse to whom we were introduced a while ago. As the 2 mutants fight, Iceman uses what he knows about Deathbird to get to her head, but Deathbird surrounds herself with flames, causing Robert to fall to the floor, his ice having melted. Is he dead? Is he unconscious? It's not clear. Deathbird, though, seems satisfied with her work and teleports her way out of the place. Phoenix, who was observing all this through her telepathy, is taken aback. Robert Drake is gone. Though she could see him fighting Deathbird, she could not perceive anything from the villain. It was as if Deathbird didn't even exist, and now Iceman has the same effect. Something is tampering with Phoenix's psychic abilities. We return to Charles Xavier, who is awaiting his nemesis while sitting on his hovering wheelchair. In comes Magneto, and for a moment, old friends share stories, much like any other reunion. Xavier congratulates Magneto on achieving achieving his dream of a homeland for mutants. Magneto, however, claims that this was but a beginning. For him, simply possessing a homeland doesn't ensure the safety of mutant kind. So long as enemies exist, mutants aren't safe. For Xavier, these so-called enemies can be made friend by finding common ground, making peace. But Magneto claims that he doesn't believe in empty words. For him, only the final solution will do. The two men will always be ideologically divided, no matter how similar or dissimilar. Xavier establishes a mind link with Magneto with his permission. Magneto now knows about Apocalypse, his plan, and most importantly, the fact that he's one of the fabled 12. Magneto, being the sinister mind that he is, peevishly asks what would happen to Apocalypse's plans if he kills all 12. Xavier isn't amused, but Magneto is serious. For him, the blood of a few is always a fair exchange for the greater good. Regardless, he's ready to help, though he hopes that it won't come to him actually having to murder the fabled group. Magneto said what? Cyclops is understandably astounded, as the Phoenix observes and retells the incident through Cerebro. Suddenly, Phoenix registers a transient spike in the background of the complex through her telepathy, almost as though a doorway in reality itself has momentarily swung open. As we're going to find out, it has. And entering through the doorway is a familiar face. In the infirmary, Mikhail Rasputin's bioscan is wholly within nominal parameters, as per Dr. McTaggart. Mikhail now desires to be back in action, and he asks his brother Colossus if there's anything he can do to solve the mystery of the 12. Suddenly, the complex is on high alert. A Horseman of Apocalypse has breached all systems of security and is within the complex. It's Death, and he's in the infirmary. Without a thought, Colossus transforms himself from flesh into organic steel. In this form, he is well near invulnerable and with immense strength. The protective brother won't let anyone harm his sibling again, and he takes Death head-on in combat. But Death was Wolverine, and he knows the weaknesses of all the X-Men. Just when he's about to deliver a lethal strike, though, Mikhail Rasputin grabs his hand and prohibits the blow. "My brother does not fight alone, assassin," he proudly declares. Dr. McTaggart grabs a gun and threatens Death, but he easily pushes her away. Swiftly, the other X-Men join the scene. Cyclops uses his laser to try and hurt Death's hand, but it isn't powerful enough. Death is now running away with Mikhail Rasputin's unconscious body. A transmat portal is open, and the team has to stop Death from escaping. At Cyclops' command, Storm fills the corridor with hurricane-force winds, but even as she acts, so too does her foes. Death escapes, along with Mikhail, and the X-Men are unsuccessful. Storm regrets not using a lightning bolt to stop the villain in his tracks, but Cyclops admits that none of the X-Men would harm him like that. Apocalypse chose Wolverine to be his Horseman for a reason. He was the X-Men's friend. He's not only a formidable adversary, but also one who the X-Men are psychologically uncomfortable with harming. The last Horseman. We've seen War, Death and Pestilence, 3 of the 4 Horsemen of Apocalypse. 3 powerful mutants whose lives have been changed by Apocalypse. Now, we're about to see the 4th and final. In Japan, in the headquarters of that nation's elite clandestine defense group, the Yakiba, a man donning red speaks to the group's agents. The man had received a message from the X-Men last night, informing him that he may be the target of Ensue Nur of Apocalypse. The agents dismiss the claims, but the man believes them wholeheartedly, citing past times when the X-Men have proved themselves to be honorable allies. The man is Sunfire 1 of the fabled 12 of Apocalypse's prophecy. The agents aren't convinced by him. As he's leaving, he hears a voice. Not that it matters, but I'm siding with the boy. The source is an entity which looks like an armored skeleton with sharp claws and a formidable appearance. It's the last Horseman of Apocalypse. It's Famine. Famine is after Sunfire, as Apocalypse is trying to gather the 12. Though the brave mutant member of the fabled 12 tries to fight back, his plasma bolts have nearly no effect on the Horseman. With a simple attack from Famine, Starfire falls to the ground, defeated. "You didn't have a prayer," declares Famine. Only after seeing Sunfire fall are the bureaucratic agents convinced of the threat of Apocalypse. Hurriedly, they alert the Security Council of a threat which must be equaled in full measure. Sunfire's sacrifice demands no less. Meanwhile, back at Xavier's Institute, Shadowcat finds Death. She tries to grab him, but fails. "Fight him, Logan," she pleads. She, like all the other X-Men, knew Wolverine as a stubborn and free man. Seeing Death now, she refuses to believe that her courageous friend has been turned into a slave. Death uses his sword to zap Shadowcat when Rogue throws a flying punch at him. Still, this is no match for Death, who tosses her across across the room, causing her to crash against a column. Fizz the Skrull tries to fight too, but his strength and confidence are at a mismatch, as he's no threat to the Horseman. Nightcrawler joins in the attack. As all the X-Men are astounded by Death's strength and their ineffectiveness against it, he slashes a column, causing the roof to fall on our team of superheroes. But Fizz emerges as a savior. He uses his ability to manipulate his size to grow to gigantic proportions, thereby removing the roof's rubble and protecting the X-Men from the impact. As the team figures what to do next, Phoenix emerges as a hologram, with good and bad news for the team. Bad news? She has recorded a total of 4 confirmed captures. Good news? Using Cerebro, she has a mark of their current location, Egypt. The team decides to split up. Cyclops orders Archangel, Nightcrawler and Shadowcat to chase Death, and Jubilee insists on joining in as well. The rest of the X-Men are off to Egypt. Fizz has found his new team. Now, the X-Men have a Skrull on their side. Meanwhile in Egypt, an army of Skrulls is combined with that of Egyptian cultists. Among them stands the tall figure of Apocalypse. The remainder of the 12D, he claims, will deliver themselves to him on their own volition in an attempt to free their friends. The friends in question are those he has kidnapped. We see familiar faces imprisoned: Cable, Iceman, Sunfire. For Apocalypse, half the battle is won. He's getting closer and closer to the age of Apocalypse. In Xavier's Institute, Elizabeth Braddock can feel the darkness reach for her, but it's not until she's actually wearing a helmet that the X-Man named Psylocke fully realizes what she's doing, what she's putting herself through. The device she wears is called Cerebro, the same device we saw Phoenix using to amplify her telepathic abilities. But such amplification is the last thing Psylocke wants to do right now. It's the last thing she should do. Still, even though she can acknowledge the risks, she cannot disavow the need. A man's soul is at stake. Psylocke's telepathic abilities are inaccessible as a result of her encounter with the Shadow King. To use them would mean freeing him from the psionic plane, his prison within the folds of her mind. The Shadow King is a villain who shouldn't be let loose, but the X-Men are desperate. Gracefully, Psylocke puts on Cerebro, setting her mind free to roam for the first time in months. She sees the subterranean access tunnels connecting the X-Men's headquarters to New York City. She can see those of the X-Men who had gone to find Death. "Any sign of him, Archangel?" Shadowcat asks. "Not a one, Kitty," he replies. The team continues looking. The Morlock tunnels where they are conjure bad memories for them. Not too long ago, Archangel lost his wings, his pride and his confidence there, while many Morlocks lost their lives. Archangel wonders why Death had to bring them down there when he hears Psylocke trying to communicate with him. She explains that she's using Cerebro to amplify Get telepathic abilities to be with the team. She wants to help. Archangel eagerly agrees, and she joins them telepathically. "I'm still trying to understand how all this happened," she sighs. Even while saying so, Psylocke knew that there was no clear answer to her question. The explanations come in fragments. Apocalypse did this to Wolverine, but was Wolverine inside, fighting, or was he dead? Now, while the other X-Men are gone to fight Apocalypse to prevent him from gathering the legendary 12, Archangel, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, Jubilee, and now Psylocke are looking for Death, still hoping to drive away Apocalypse's influence from their friend's mind. Where's Logan? Jubilee and Shadowcat discuss a plan of action to follow when they hunt down Death. Despite being two of Wolverine's closest friends, they want to battle him. In such a scenario, they see little difference between helping and hurting their friend. But Psylocke dislikes this line of thought entirely. Resorting to violence would only mean succumbing to Apocalypse's scheme. But is there any way to stop Death without harming Wolverine? Nightcrawler has an idea, but it would require using Cerebro to a greater extent than Psylocke would be comfortable with. Elsewhere, Death moves as swiftly and silently as his namesake. The dank gloom of the tunnels suits him. He's at home here, but then, why are his senses on edge? Sounds, scents, images of past, images of death. As quickly as they come, they're gone. There's no threat nearby. So why does he feel like he's under attack? The reason is that Psylocke has locked onto him using Cerebro. He can now feel the darkness rise up around him. Anguished thoughts he believed long buried. For so so long, he tries not to remember them, but now the memories are too strong and the pain too real. Taking advantage of Psylocke's mental attack, the X-Men strike a disoriented Wolverine. Their aim is to confuse their friend, to not linger on enough to become a target, and to strike from all ends. Archangel tries capturing him, but Death is too strong, even when disoriented. He pushes them away and escapes yet again. He could have killed both of them. He knew that. Instead, he took flight again. Something about this place. Why is it having such a strong effect on him? Mental images wash over him. Was he here before? Did he watch as gruesome things happened? No, right? The answer had to be no. There has to be something else. Another explanation. But why does every step he take overflow his senses with memories? Why does he remember so much? "I nearly got married here once, remember?" Shadowcat says as she strikes him. "Me and Caliban, way before he fell under the influence of your master for the first time. It was a sweet gesture. But do you remember how scared I was, Logan?" But Logan was dead. At least Death thought as much. This mention of his past enrages him. "I am Death," he commands. But the mind games of the X-Men aren't over yet. "Are you?" asks Shadowcat, suggesting that there's a difference in claiming to be something and actually fitting the bill. They two are engaged in battle, and though Shadowcat is able to dodge Death's attacks at first, thanks to her phasing powers, she falls prey to an attack by Wolverine's claws on her foot. Shadowcat lies injured, but just as Wolverine prepares to deliver his final blow, Archangel flies in to save her. Archangel has dark memories associated with the tunnels too. His mind is troubled, and he's being a little antsy, as Psylocke notices. She asks him, telepathically, to stay in control and calm down. Psylocke can see Archangel's thoughts. She can see the conflict he has had with Wolverine in the past, but she can also sense something physically wrong with him, something growing inside him. Death strikes again. Archangel is able to keep him at bay by striking back and pushing him away. As Wolverine tries to return to attack mode, he's faced by Jubilee. Jubilee tries to appeal to his conscience yet again, since the two have shared a deeply close relationship. "Logan, you know I've always been there for you," she pleads. She cites old memories, when they worked together as a team, when she first found him nailed to a crucifix in the Australian outback, when Magneto ripped out the adamantium from his skeleton. This time, Death succumbs a little. Psylocke forms a mental connection with Wolverine. She can sense that he's fighting to gain control. She begs him to continue to fight, to let his true personality reach to the surface. Is it another hopeless attempt? No, it's not. Wolverine takes over. "It's okay, kiddo. It's me," he says to Jubilee. Death's taking a holiday. For a brief moment, everything seems to be okay. The team was able to bring Wolverine back to win this mental battle with Apocalypse. Most importantly, they were able to bring their friend back, but calm in the X-Men universe only points to another storm. Suddenly, Psylocke senses something very, very wrong within Archangel. He's screaming. "Light," he says, "never dies, not even in monsters." What's going on? Something's different within Archangel. He can feel it. He tries to remember what happened, what's changed, but all he remembers is that he was looking for something elusive. It was like looking for the day in the night. The darkness swirled around him, enveloped him. The darkness was entirely upon him. Figures tumble to the ground, and it's only then, at this, his darkest hour, that he sees light. It's always been there. It never left. Archangel is flying above the city's skyscrapers, and Wolverine finds him, bringing him to the ground. The two are going to have a showdown. What's wrong with Archangel? Lest we forget, Psylocke using Cerebro was a bit of a gamble. It was exceedingly dangerous, running the risk of releasing the evil telepathic entity of the Shadow King from the psionic plane. Yet, her efforts paid off, as she was able to deprogram Wolverine. Now, however, Archangel had been engulfed by a blackness which could affect her too, but she can't stop. Archangel is not only her teammate, but the man she loves. She has to save him. As Wolverine tries to strike at Archangel, even he notices something different. Archangel's wings seem to be made of light. Psylocke tries communicating with Logan telepathically, but he's had enough of her mind games. Still, she convinces him to listen. Archangel just attacked Wolverine, stabbed him with feather-like projectiles made of light. Now, he's on the loose. Dr. McTaggart begs Psylocke to stop using Cerebro. The risk isn't worth it. She wants to pull the plug. Jubilee communicates with the Doctor through the screens. Nightcrawler and Shadowcat are hurt, and though it isn't lethal, Jubilee needs help to bring them to the Medilab. Dr. McTaggart acknowledges this, saying that she's on her way down there. She suggests that Nightcrawler could talk some sense into Psylocke, who's glued to Cerebro. Everyone in the team is aware of the risk Psylocke is undertaking, and she is too, only she doesn't care anymore. Archangel's past comes flooding back to him. Apocalypse's plan to mold Wolverine into his Horseman of Death was by no means his first attempt. Warren too had been the Horseman called Death, the Archangel harbinger of doom. Mutilated, his wings having been amputated, and on the blink of hopelessness, he welcomed the darkness as it overtook him. But now, he's better, right? He knows what Psylocke is doing, trying to remind him of his past, trying to get to his head. Suddenly, all the darkness is gone. Archangel has cleansed Psylocke of it all, repelled the darkness with light. Archangel visited a terminally ill child in a hospital named Candy, saw him as God. Wolverine is standing at the window of the same hospital. The kid talks about how an angel visited her and took her pain away. Wolverine tells Psylocke that Warren, Archangel, has been here. What's he doing? Warren has created a powerful block, denying Psylocke entry into his mind. Wolverine is convinced that Archangel is headed to another hospital. Psylocke's lover is looking for something. Unlike the blockage Archangel has created, Wolverine's mind is like an open book to Psylocke. With his permission, she delves further into it. Wolverine's thoughts are a jumbled mess at best. Even if he truly wanted Psylocke to break her psionic link with him, he wouldn't make her do it. He's facing a long, dark tunnel, and vulnerability is what he must sacrifice to reach the other side. It's neither the first nor the most painful sacrifice he's had to make in recent times. For Psylocke, images suddenly begin to merge in her mind. Wolverine and Archangel become as one, their mutual suffering at the hand of Apocalypse searing through her mind, both remolded as Apocalypse's vision of death. She can feel the trauma of each transformation, the strength so necessary to endure it, the weakness they both felt giving into it. Psylocke never knew such power coupled with such despair. Archangel can feel Psylocke in his head. He doesn't want her there. As the Horseman wore, Abraham Kairos rode as one with Archangel. Bound for glory, the only reward for his allegiance to Apocalypse was a long, painful journey into perpetual night. War no longer, Abraham Kairos lives through medicine. He's a quadriplegic, incapable of movement or speech, but he's more than able to see the light. The light is emitted by Archangel, who stands above Abraham's bedside, regally looking below, but the light falters as Wolverine attacks its source. "That's close enough, Archangel," he exclaims. Psylocke feels a surge in all three men. For each of them, their wounds inflicted by Apocalypse run deep. She feels the strength of Apocalypse's grip and fears what Wolverine fears, just as the darkness fears the night. She sees the two men as opposing ends of the same spectrum. Logan is volatile, barely in control. Warren, on the other hand, is calm and sedate, too focused. Psylocke sees glowing white talons on Archangel's hands, strong enough to rip through the fabric of a person's psyche. As she attempts to probe deeper into her lover's mind, she hears a voice. "You know what you need to do, my lovely. Release me. I can stop this. I can restore them both to what they once were." The source is the Shadow King, an evil not to be trusted, but she's oh so desperate. Just when she's about to give in, Archangel enters her mind. He stops her, saved her from the villain. He tells her to put Shadow King back in his prison. He's come too far. It's time for Psylocke to disconnect from Cerebro. She listens. She asks Dr. McTaggart to shut Cerebro down. She's convinced. Warren doesn't need her help anymore. Now, more than ever before, he knows exactly what he has to do. As Psylocke leaves Wolverine's mind, he feels pangs of anxiety. He knows what she wants him to do, but how can he trust anyone else when he can't even trust himself anymore? He knows his options. Give in to the fear or look to the light. Wolverine and Archangel stop fighting. Darkness fades and night becomes day. Archangel stands by Abraham's bedside. He has come looking for answers. His head is filled with questions of what if, to which he needs answers. Answers not only for him, but for Abraham as well. Archangel asks Abraham if he would be willing to serve Apocalypse again, if it meant that he would be able to walk once more. The answer comes silently. Even if Abraham was able to sleep, no words would be necessary, for in that moment, moment, Archangel knew. For both him and Abraham, the realization is truly enlightening. Then, the most marvelous thing happens. Somehow, out of nowhere, Abraham is able to walk again. Archangel and Wolverine stand on a rooftop. Warren himself doesn't know what happened. Somehow, when he bathed Abraham with light from within him, he suffused Abraham with the power Apocalypse had given Archangel. Archangel had cured his old friend, but at what cost? Archangel was back to normal now, so had been Wolverine. He, Archangel, now wants to make a difference in people's lives. He wants to put together his power and his wealth to really help people. Still, he feels like there's something missing. He doesn't know what to do next. Wolverine jokes that he's just not used to happy endings. Well, X-Men seldom have them. The X-Man, Nate Gray, was a mutant warrior of a world where man and mutant fought an all-out war that ended in complete and utter ruination. Now, he has found himself trying to make his way through our world and will stop at nothing to ensure that this planet does not fall victim to them same destruction as his own. He's known, quite simply, as X-Man. As Nate walks through a deserted street, he finds a poster on the floor. The headline reads that 2 kids, Joseph and Galen Bailey, are missing. The kids are the niece and nephew of Jean Grey, Phoenix. Nate has rescued them once, after which they were taken away by someone. He wonders what happened to them, but deep down, he knows. It's the same thing which has happened to the entire city. Cold Snap 9, a lethal chemical weapon. In the rubble of the street lie familiar faces. Mr. and Mrs. Richards of the Fantastic Four, Captain America of the Avengers. What are they doing on the floor? CS9 kills instantly, then evaporates, dispersing as quickly as it spreads. What he sees is exactly what the Dark Beast would have done to New York, but he had defeated him, hadn't he? He was sure that he did, but everything's a little fuzzy. He doesn't know what he's doing, standing on a rooftop facing the embassy of Latveria, one of the last remaining human societies in a mutant-dominated world. It's like he was in a different world, an Earth where nothing he's done actually happened, an Earth where he doesn't exist. He looks into a mirror and screams at his own reflection. It's Caliban. Caliban's face with his hair. Last we saw Nate, he had left the company of the Fantastic Four and was attacked by Pestilence, who teleported him to an undisclosed location. Now, it appears that he had poisoned Nate, infecting him with a toxin that has changed the way he looks. He's not in the world he's from too. Pestilence took him somewhere else. But where was he? Why did Pestilence do this to him? Nate looks above him and sees Spider-Man, perched on the corner of a rooftop. Sighing with relief, he thinks he's found a friend, but he's so immensely wrong. This Earth Spider-Man has wings and fangs, and is surrounded by a pack of vampires led by Morbius, the living vampire himself. But Spidey and Nate had defeated Morbius. He had the fang marks to show for it. Deeply confused, he dashes away. There's no way these vampires can match his speed, right? But they do. They do match his speed. Nate runs away again, wondering what the hell is going on. He loses the vampires, but doesn't find an answer to his question. On the street below, he finds the Dark Beast and his Brotherhood fighting with the X-Men. Delighted to find the Butcher in the slaughterhouse, he tries to attack, but he simply goes through the villain and his army. He can't touch them for some reason. It's like he's a ghost. Desperately, he tries to do something. He tries to use his psychic powers, but things don't make any sense in this world. There's a reason for that. It's all fake. It's a product of his imagination. In reality, Nate Gray regains consciousness and is standing before Pestilence. Pestilence brought him to Apocalypse's lair in Egypt. Everything else Nate experienced while he was unconscious was his own doing. Now Apocalypse needed him awake, and awake he was. As he stands before Apocalypse, Nate cannot believe what he's hearing. One version of Apocalypse had defiled Nate's own world, but he survived for a reason. Seeing the same Butcher seek world domination again, Nate refuses to be a part of it. But Nate and the unequaled, unlimited forces at his demand, as Apocalypse claims, play the most crucial role in Apocalypse's design. What are these forces? Why does Apocalypse require Nate Gray so badly? We're close to all our questions being answered. The final battle. Shape-shifting Skrulls and ancient Egyptian cult members quiver alike with dread at his presence among them. Apocalypse ascends, with his army assembled. After tens of centuries of patiently plotting, his plan is unfolding. The X-Men are on their way with their leader to unite the fabled 12. The prophecy was about to be fulfilled. The X-Men have forged a temporary alliance with one of their greatest foes, Magneto. Most of them are surprised at their longtime enemy's presence, but Professor X assures them that they can trust Magneto for now. He is one of the fabled 12. The mutants are standing on the exact coordinates where Phoenix has registered the energy signatures of their missing teammates, but no teammates are to be found. It's a trap. With a push of a button, Apocalypse makes the ground beneath our alliance shift. The team members brace themselves, and the disruption disappears as soon as it began. Such an impossibly localized earthquake couldn't have occurred naturally. The team knows that they're being followed. Suddenly, Apocalypse's minions emerge. An army of Skrulls and ancient Egyptian cult members are set to attack our team of mutants. But little do the X-Men know, the weapons of Apocalypse's minions are purposely set to disable, for he wants the remaining half of the 12 captured alive and unharmed. The army is merely a distraction. Storm conjures up a hurricane to sweep the minions away, but suddenly, transmat portals appear behind her. In come Pestilence and Famine, grabbing Storm in an attempt to take her away. But the Horsemen are no match for the experienced Professor X, who uses his powers of telekinesis to mentally attack them. Storm is freed, and in fact, Xavier's Psyblast seems to have had more of an effect than intended, with the two Horsemen appearing to revert back to their true forms in their unconscious state. "The real Caliban?" Xavier exclaims in a sense of false home. But no, Caliban was still Pestilence. As Pestilence and Famine attempt to attack Xavier, Magneto flies in to save his longtime nemesis, but Apocalypse has set a distraction. Astra and Joseph, old enemies of Magneto's, mock him and his ego. Enraged to find them alive, Magneto attacks them. Apocalypse then orders the Skrulls to summon the last of the 12. Bishop, one of the 12, had been bio-tagged by Apocalypse and was immediately recalled into the battle arena. He now tries to fight alongside the X-Men. He's not alone. Cannonball, the X-Force, and Generation X younger mutant superheroes who have worked with the X-Men are here too. With so many new faces in the midst of literal shape-shifting aliens, the team is understandably worried if they're surrounded by imposters. In battle, few can be trusted. Professor X could use his telepathy to confirm the identities of those on the side of the X-Men, but he had been taken out by the Skrulls. The other option was Phoenix, but she was on the other side of the battlefield. What the hell were the X-Men to do? Luckily, Xavier had anticipated the possibility of such an event. The Beast was carrying a hormonal compound developed by him and Dr. MacTaggart, designed to relax the cells of Skrulls upon contact, reducing them to their original forms. By releasing the gas, it would be evident who's a Skrull and who's not. So, the Beast does exactly this. On the other side of the battlefield, long-lost lovers, Polaris and Havoc, are reunited, but it's just another trap. As Polaris rushes to him, Cyclops tells her to stop, and Phoenix rushes after her to stop her, but Havoc captures both and teleports back to Apocalypse. Just like that, two more of the 12 are captured. Cyclops is furious. "Where have you taken my wife?" he screams. Apocalypse has almost all of the 12, including Professor X and Magneto, imprisoned in floating null orbs, which rid them of their power. His plan is working. Cyclops wants his wife back. As he attacks the Skrulls, he harms Colossus by accident. He rushes to attend to his teammate when he sees yet another Colossus run towards him. "Beware, comrade, this is not what it appears to be." But the one sounding the warning was the imposter himself. Boom, another trap. Just like that, Cyclops is captured too. On the other side of the battlefield, the Skrull-detecting hormonal compound released by Beast is having a delayed effect. Storm is convinced that everyone is exactly who they appear to be. Her nativity becomes the reason for her capture, as a Skrull captures her too. As the remaining few of the good guys fight on, Deathbird-turned-War captures yet another of the 12 Bishop. Just like that, Apocalypse has collected all of the 12. As the remainder of the X-Men fight on, with scores of Skrulls and Egyptian cultists, Apocalypse moves on to the final phase of his plan. He orders his Horsemen to leave him alone and to seal the chambers behind them. The mixed bag of 12 imprisoned mutants are the last dozen rungs on his ladder to godhood, to omnipotence. As they die, one by one, Apocalypse shall rise as the heart of the universe. The powers of all 12, Professor X, Magneto, Polaris, Cyclops, Phoenix, Cable, Iceman, Sunfire, Storm, Bishop, Mikhail Rasputin, and the living monolith. The powers of all of them shall flow through Apocalypse. Nate Gray, too, shall play a crucial role in the final design, halfway around the world in a sub-basement of Xavier's Institute, as those very, very few of the X-Men who were left behind. The team consists of Archangel, Wolverine, Psylocke, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, Jubilee, and Dr. Moira MacTaggart. It's up to these 7 to save the entire world, and they're set to leave for Egypt. Only, they'll have to make a little detour along the way. The end of the world. Stacy Kramer may appear simple on the outside, yet she's anything but. She's in love with Nathan Summers, who some know as Cable, a man who is a time traveler from a distant future. Usually, Cable was able to find his way back from any crisis. This time, Stacy and her reporter friend Irene aren't terribly sure. Cable, along with the rest of the fabled 12, is imprisoned in an orb which dampens mutant abilities. Effectively, all 12 are powerless. Apocalypse had planned everything out in meticulous detail. As the imprisoned mutants discuss their fate with one another, they ask Cable what a future ruled by Apocalypse, the future where he came from, looks like. They ask about the role of the 12. Unfortunately, Cable can't grant them a definitive answer, as records from the current era are almost non-existent in the future. All he knows is from verbal accounts of myths and legends, which say that the 12 were the failed saviors of mutant and humankind, a group that fought Apocalypse. Suddenly, a strong force arises from above the spherical cages. Mikhail asks Cable if he knows what it is, and if it has come from Apocalypse, but Cable has no idea. Whatever the source of energy was, though, it wasn't coming from Apocalypse. Cyclops and Cable scream. Cyclops, aka Scott Summers, has entered the psionic plane, the depths of his own mind. His mind feels like it's on fire. He sees himself in a graveyard. Here, he sees his son Cable. Scott approaches him, asking where they are. Cable replies that they're in his home, the future. Cable is devastated. He has gone back in time only to prevent the future he grew up in. He had gone to destroy Apocalypse before he enslaved the world, but Apocalypse still lives, and his plan now seems to be inevitable. Cyclops finds it heart-wrenching to see his son so broken, so defeated. The two men then have a series of other visions wherein they bond, filled with common emotions and regret. Suddenly, snow falls, and Scott's missing. So, Cable enters a house at a certain distance, opens the door, and finds Madeline Pryor, his mother. It was Madeline who had pulled the father and son into the psionic plane. The house wasn't an ordinary one, it was the one where the family, Scott, Madeline and Cable, had lived, when Cable was just a baby. They were the icy state of Alaska, within the psionic plane, of course. Cable doesn't know why his long-lost mother has brought him here. "I don't remember calling for you," he says, but he did call for her. As he was dying in Apocalypse's prison, he was thinking about things he wishes he could have changed. He regretted not spending enough time with his parents, so there his mother was. Despite her hatred for Cyclops, she allowed Cable to have his last few moments with him. But what did this mean? Was Cyclops dead? Not quite. Not yet. Madeline wants to save Cable. She offers to keep him in the psionic plane to rebuild their relationship. But Cable has no love lost for his mother. He has people he loves, and he wants to save them. People who care about him in return. Madeline begs her son to stay, but he refuses, demanding her to release Cyclops. Cable wants to fight Apocalypse till his last breath. A broken Madeline Pryor reluctantly agrees. She can't help her family in their fight either. She is but a ghost in the psionic plane. Seeing her plans to live a peaceful life fail, he accepts her density and says goodbye, allowing her son and husband to return to reality. So there they are, in reality, imprisoned. In walks Apocalypse, and the end of the world seems to be around the corner. As the remaining few of the X-Men battle the vast army of Skrulls outside, Apocalypse initiates the final steps of his plan within the confines of his lair. Using the technology he had stolen long years ago from a race of celestial gods, he was stealing the powers of 11 mutants in his grasp. These powers will then be funneled through a 12th, the living monolith, to finally be transferred to Apocalypse himself. In order to handle such an immense sum of energies, Apocalypse must adapt. For this, he shall take upon the body of Nate Grey, the mutant every bit as strong as Charles Xavier and his team, the most potent force on the planet. Apocalypse initiates the transfer, but as he stands, consuming energy cell by cell through Nate Grey's body, the transfer is suddenly interrupted. The energies reverse direction, automatically draining back into the Look again. Something had been miscalculated. It was Magneto. Magneto's powers had been exhausted much sooner than Apocalypse expected. The reason was that these powers were completely dependent on recharges from Magneto's personal mutant battery, Fabian Cortez. But no one, not even Apocalypse, knew about this. Nate Grey is delighted. Even back in his world, which Apocalypse had destroyed, Magneto proved to be the greatest drain of the resources of Apocalypse's state. Some things, it appeared, never changed, but Apocalypse simply doesn't care. Furiously, he reinitiates the flow of powers. If he must make do with 11, so be it. He increases the speed of the transfer significantly, causing an immensely large influx of energies to be concentrated on the Ahmet Abdol, the living monolith, the funnel of the circuit. Ahmet grows to a gigantic size and breaks open his prison, freeing all of the 12 as a result of the impact. The monolith's wrath. It actually looks like there's still a chance for the good guys to win. Xavier begs the monolith to work together with the X-Men to defeat Apocalypse, but it disagrees. The monolith, supercharged with power, registers even telepathically to Phoenix as nothing less than a force of nature. Sunfire, Storm, and Iceman all try to mount a combined offensive, but this is to no avail. The monolith is completely drunk with power. Apocalypse, unaware of the damaged circuit, waits for unimaginable power to join his possession. Outside, Fizz and his fellow deviant Skrull friend have convinced their fellow deviants that the real enemy is Apocalypse. Thus, some Skrulls have turned against the others, and the X-Men who were fighting them are able to leave the battleground. They rush in search of Apocalypse. As the recently imprisoned X-Men members of the 12 rush to unite with their teammates, they're stopped by war, pestilence, and famine, all of the remaining Horsemen of Apocalypse. They had faced the Horseman before, even turned one of them back. Now, however, they don't have any time. Mikhail Rasputin acknowledges as much as he takes one for the team and hops dimensions with the Horseman. The team, though surprised as they were under the impression that Rasputin had lost this ability, continues rushing. They have no time to lose. In the epicenter of the transfer of energies, they find Apocalypse and Nate Grey, surrounded by a large sphere of light. Cable is martyred, trying to stop Apocalypse, rushing towards the energy field and falling to the ground. No offensive by the X-Men is able to affect either the living monolith or Apocalypse. Magneto tries using Polaris's powers to tap into the magnetic field of the Earth itself, yet even this barely staggers the monolith. Bishop declares that he's the solution. The monolith is unflinched because it absorbs any and all energies, but so does Bishop. He tries to absorb all of the living monolith's energy, causing the giant to fall to the ground, but the energies overwhelm Bishop and he disappears, presumably to his proper place in the time stream, the future of his birth. Cyclops tries to shoot his optic lasers at Apocalypse. The monster barely flinches. I suppose the rift caused by Cable's rash sacrifice must appear to make me vulnerable, but it's nothing more than an oversight, Cyclops, he says, easily corrected with a fresh dose of bioenergies. Yours should do nicely, he says, as he tries to steal Cyclops' energy from the very optic lasers he used to attack him. But he's made a mistake. Phoenix and Cyclops are telepathically connected. By opening a conduit between him and Cyclops, Apocalypse had left himself wide open to Phoenix. Phoenix's telekinetic attack on Apocalypse causes him great damage, burning off his mask to reveal his grotesque visage. Phoenix is shocked, but Apocalypse's flesh is merely a vessel to be replaced, he declares as he strikes at her again with immense strength, taking her out. What remains eternal, he claims, is his will. He returns to the process of the transfer of energies when Cyclops notices that Apocalypse is truly vulnerable. In this moment, a gun, in a slingshot, could defeat him, but Apocalypse had drained the power out of Cyclops, and he's helpless. But then Scott makes the ultimate sacrifice. Thinking of his wife, thinking of morality, he jumps right into the transfer and pushes Nate Grey away. But he's gone horribly wrong, because what Apocalypse wanted was now achieved by Cyclops instead of Nate. The foes merge. Physically, Cyclops and Apocalypse have become one godless abomination. Professor Xavier cannot even sense Cyclops' soul as the saga ends on a cliffhanger. The story carries on into the Ages of Apocalypse arc, where Apocalypse, using the energies gathered from the 12, remade reality twice, attempting to recreate the process once more and finish his transformation. He was unable to do so, for the X-Men fought him both times, in the past and the future. His energies spent, he and the living monolith escaped. The X-Men had prevented Apocalypse from becoming a god at the seeming expense of Cyclops' life. Heartbroken over her husband's death, Jean took a leave of absence from the X-Men. The entire story, which is from the next volume, will be explored in a future Marvelous video. Marvelous Verdict. The long, dynamic saga is certainly a story worth telling, and one which is a delight to follow, though it may at times feel as though there are too many storylines unfolding at the same time. The writers and illustrators have done a spectacular job in connecting universes within the Marvel Comics. Apocalypse is an iconic villain, and his grandiosity has been done justice in this saga. While the 2016 X-Men movie's depiction of Apocalypse might have its fans and haters, the comics provide a robust, well-built character in him, and the saga remains a classic.